Hey everyone, well, it's another day, and that means another host of Activision Blizzard updates. We've got sponsors pulling out, we've got some drama in the CDL, and also a little bit from Jason Schreier's additional reporting on the company. I'm going to kick it off, though, with the most recent bit of news, which is that Bobby Kotick has been found, inadequate, at least by one of the investors. So, Activision Blizzard shareholder slams inadequate company response as surfaced by Megan. As for what's happening, SOC Investment Group says that Activision Blizzard's recent promises to improve their under-fire corporate culture don't go nearly far enough to address the deep and widespread issues with equity inclusion and human capital management currently dogging the company. And that absolutely is something to be concerned about if you are an investor, because these are all things that will contribute to Blizzard games being not really done on time and not being as good as they could be. And that's only if you're taking the perspective of an investor who doesn't give a shit about the workers and only gives a shit about the product. Now, the difference with SOC is that they are an activist investor, and you won't recognize their name, but they used to go by CTW, and they're that investment firm that we have heard of so many other times in the news, often regarding CEO compensation and the ratio of that compensation, specifically Bobby Kotick, of course, to the average employee of the firm. Now, an activist investor, just so you know, you might think that means an investor who's, fighting for rights or something like that. Generally, it doesn't. An activist investor basically just means an investor who is being active. Now, that could involve, like CTW, trying to advocate for workers' rights and things like that, which they try to sort of have throughout their portfolio. It could mean that. It could also mean the likes of, say, is it Peter Singer? I forget, but that's not pretty what an activist investor means. But for this one, yeah, they do care, it seems, about just a lot of the issues that, that we're all facing, like the CEO pay ratios and situations like this. So that's basically that. They've released their statement. Here is a letter from their executive director. No changes have been announced or proposed that would in any way alter the current process for filing vacancies either to the board of directors or senior management. No changes have been announced with respect to executive pay, either with respect to clawing back compensation from executives who are found to have engaged in or enabled abusive practices, or to align executives with equity goals. There was the Wilmer Hale bit, which they say is deficient in a number of ways because of the reputation of Wilmer Hale as a defender of the wealthy and connected. Also that it's got no track record of uncovering wrongdoing. The lead investigator does not have in-depth experience investigating workplace harassment and abuse. And the scope of the investigation fails to address the full range of equity issues Mr. Kotick acknowledges. So it's basically just them saying, we don't buy as a load of bullshit. Now, as for what they want this. They want an increase in board diversity and equity by adding a woman director, preferably one with a history of advocacy, by the end of 2021, committing to a gender balance on the board by 2025, and reserving at least one board seat for a nominee selected by current employees as their representative. I think the idea of an employee rep on the board is an interesting one. They also want to claw back bonuses from execs that have basically been found to engage in or enable that abusive behavior, award no bonuses in 2021, and make sure that further future bonuses are contingent on the company achieving clearly articulated and independently verified milestones for diversity and equity. Basically, it would be tying those milestones to the bonus structure of execs, whereas right now the bonus structure of the execs is, of course, financial performance of the company. So if the execs are going to be doing what they are well remunerated themselves for, then maybe you can see that there is an incentives problem if the money's the only thing the execs care about. So that can lead to the short-term thinking that I think we've all seen. They also want them to undertake a company-wide equity review, similar to the racial equity reviews that Facebook, Airbnb, Starbucks, and BlackRock have completed or promised, but that will encompass the full range of people's concerns. So basically, they want a hell of a lot more. That's kind of similar to how the employees themselves want a hell of a lot more than what Activision Blizzard is officially going to be doing. As for the future with this story, well, what's Bobby going to say? What's Bobby going to do? That's basically that. Now, he did recently promise that they're going to be a company that sets the example for, this in our industry. It's just what's actually going to happen. That's basically it. They probably wish that SOC were not involved with their company, because it's like every quarter, even when they were known as CTW, they were kicking up a bit of a stink. That would have been very inconvenient for the Acti-Blizz execs. So that's essentially that situation. Not a surprise. Probably not even that much to say on it, really, other than more shit's coming their way. There's investor lawsuits. There's this. There's the employees. It's not looking good for management.
I think that's the only real takeaway here, is that the employees and the investors are on the same side at long last, which I guess means that the actual executives have basically, you would imagine, no choice, because the only group that's kind of not had an advocacy group speak up is the customers. But I think a lot of customers have made their point clear.
That's actually interesting then. Yeah, it's like the investors, many of the investors,
and obviously not all,
the employees, and actually many of the gamers are pretty much all in a situation where everyone agrees. Less bullshit in the workplace, people being treated well, more games shipping on time. That's literally in the best interests of everyone, including the employees, because of their profit shares and stuff like that.
Yep.
It's pretty simple what we all want.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's just a hope if will the executives finally have to actually move under this pressure? Yeah. Will they be forced to? And I think if there could be a direct line of communication between SOC and then whatever the I can't remember, what are they called, the ABK workers union or employees?
Yes.
Not union, sorry, the group. They're not a union, but if that group can communicate openly and make it known that those two groups are working together, then that is effectively the board are surrounded on all sides, and then they'll have to move. As to whether all their demands will be fully reasonable in the end, if they go they might get a bit drunk on the power, but in terms of solving the problems that are there that need solved, this is the avenue to do it, I think.
Yeah, well, there's different ways of working through negotiations, and in a situation like this where there is a lot of hostility, you could see a situation of gathering as much power and clout as is possible, and then making demands that are kind of unrealistic for the company, but doing that with the purpose of, or at least with the understanding that when the company meets you halfway, well, the further you push in the beginning, the more you're probably going to get.
Standard haggling,
Yeah. Okay, so next we do have another little thing which is not particularly related to the other Activision Blizzard stories of today, but it does bear mentioning. The Diablo 2 Resurrected beta opens next week. And I've got to say, based on, for me, it was based on Skill Up's video covering this game. I'm very, very excited. I can't wait to jump in, because D2 is actually a game that I basically missed out on, especially with Skill Up reporting that when you actually plug a gamepad in, the control scheme and stuff apparently feels great. So I thought that was all pretty cool. So early access for this game starts Friday, August 13th. That's available to anybody who's pre-ordered the game or the fancier Diablo Primeval Edition. Then the open beta starts Friday, August 20th at 1 p.m, and both the early access period and the open beta are on everything bar the Switch, with cross-progression support pretty much on everything. You can try Paladin, Druid, Barbarian, Amazon, Sorceress. The multiplayer will support 8 players in PvP or PvE, and both periods will only include the game's first 2 acts, though there is no level cap, and the full game launches September 23rd. That's all good. There is a bit of a dose of bad news here, which does make it less Diablo 2, because this is a downgrade over the base version. So there was a Q&A. Basically, Blizzard have quietly announced that they are removing TCP IP multiplayer. So this was asked, and then the answer is TCP IP support will not be available in the upcoming beta or the final game. After careful deliberation, we will no longer be supporting this option, as we identified potential security risks and are committed to safeguarding the player experience. Basically, no peer-to-peer multiplayer. Nothing new to players these days, of course, but it is a crying shame. I think we would all agree. That's rough for mods, rough for LAN parties with offline characters. Also, no piracy, Activision Blizzard can get more accurate MAU numbers. So that is a pity. It's not the exact same situation, but whenever these things go, it does make me sad. As an example, I really like StarCraft 2, and it's always sad when you see a LAN tournament in StarCraft go down because of Battle.net server issues. It's happened a few times. It interrupts matches, lag spikes in a LAN, and you're just kind of like, yeah. Now it impacts StarCraft 2 a lot more than it will impact a game like this. I think it's just kind of sad the option is gone.
Yep, the option's gone, and, there being an option, go, okay, sure, fine, whatever. But the problem I personally take is that there's no upside. What they say here is we identified potential security risks. So you think through what that actually means for the player. And I guess that means that there'll be because you need, there's offline and online characters. So you'd imagine that online characters would have to be verified through, Battle.net servers. Which I think means that, the hacked modded characters would be available on this, this theoretical peer-to-peer network. You could see how that might cause problems for players who are trying to have a real experience, but over LAN.
Yeah.
Or not LAN, but over like the community servers and stuff like that. But that's basically the only upside. All the other upsides are on Blizzard's end. It means that they get all the telemetry that they can. It means that piracy is significantly down, which, I agree with generally. And that, everything's funneled through Battle.net, so they know all the numbers, they get all the numbers, they get all the big MAUs that they can possibly have. And, that's, technically fair. But when it comes at a loss of experience to the customer, then you're like, well, yeah. What are you doing? I mean, think back to Diablo 3,
Error 37?
Error 37. Yeah, that's the one that was the big, the big, oh shit, always online has wrecked us. And in this case, always online isn't going to be a problem because you can have an offline character, like you can in a lot of other ARPGs these days. But it's still a case of, you said you were going to have this in, and now you've changed your mind. You've changed your mind quietly in a blog post announcing the beta. Not super quietly, it's literally there, so props to them for not telling anyone. But it feels to me like someone at the higher end of Blizzard went, sorry Diablo 2 team, that's good for players, but you have to get rid of it because we need the numbers, we need the stats.
I think it could be some of that. Also, just like somebody says, okay, here's the risk assessment for this feature.
Yeah.
From the cybersecurity side, and maybe they do just get spooked by it because, in a way, things are a lot more sophisticated nowadays than they were in the past in terms of people's ability to, exploit shit. Okay, cybersecurity is also a lot better, but maybe if that's not exactly the specialization of a games company and not something they want to put significant resources into, then I suppose you can understand it.
I mean, I think if we're talking about cybersecurity in games,
Apex.
who hasn't been hacked?
Yeah.
And not even just Apex, surfer-wise, but including, CDPR, EA, Capcom, Ubisoft as well. I can't remember if Ubisoft were or not, but everyone's just been hacked.
Yeah.
But it's a case where I don't really see the connection technically to real security risks and there being an offline mode. It's player facing stuff. There's a little bit of that.
Yeah.
But there are other companies that are currently allowing peer-to-peer stuff, and everyone has a great time with it. So it feels like it's literally just to me, I just assume this is because they value what they'll get out of it more than what players will get out of it.
I think that is a fair assumption and almost certainly the case.
Yep.
I'm trying to devil's advocate a little bit in this one to try to work it out, but ultimately TCP/IP should be there in the same way that StarCraft 2 should have LAN support and Reforged should have had LAN support. But they didn't, and I think we can sort of know why. We do have confirmed bad news for Overwatch.
Of course.
Good news for the Overwatch viewers, because Cheez-Its crunch time is no longer going to be a thing. And that is because Kellogg will no longer be advertising Cheez-Its or Pringles during the Overwatch League. Now, this is a very funny thing because they had this segment called the Cheez-It Crunch Time, which is where the gameplay, when it was getting really sweaty, they would swap all of the league branding to Cheez-Its, which players really loved. Whenever this happened, it went to Cheez-Its Crunch Time, but the transition just never finished. So the Cheez-Its just covered the action and kind of ruined the viewer experience. But there you go. No Cheez-Its. It's a big hit. No Cheez-Its anymore, boys. Now T-Mobile have also confirmed that they're, of course, freezing their overall sponsorship. And, of course, State Farm and Coca-Cola, where basically they temporarily froze sponsors pending them reassessing the overall situation. There's not much to get into here other than this is obviously a bad time, especially since the Overwatch League is something that they were very much trying to pump up to their investors. Basically, they wanted to make it esports NFL. I don't think that was successful. So that's that. I don't think there's too much to get into. So
not at all.
Basically, the CDL also has had a bit of a problem where they returned to LAN, but then some players just, I'll read it from CDL Intel. Multiple CDL players have tested positive for COVID-19 within the last week. These players could be cleared in time for playoffs, but this would still jeopardize the event in one way or another. Here's what I think the options are. 1, everything is fine, show goes on. 2, goes on without fans. 3, players test positive and teams are forced to use subs. 4, playoffs are played online. 5, playoffs are postponed. Now, the CDL was hit by COVID after basically one event with the crowd, where it looks like a bunch of players ignored official guidelines, went into the crowd to sign stuff, and were also, hotel mingling. Which, you know what? It's not the rules of the tournament you signed up to play in, so whoops. Now, this has knocked out an Optic member, some other big names, and basically been a bit of a drama that, in a world where, as is pointed out here, a sponsor has left, T-Mobile have left the CDL, you don't want drama like this to be actually happening. So, it's not doing too good at the 2 big leagues that Activision Blizzard preside over. It's also not doing too good at Activision Blizzard, because we have got to talk just a little bit about this from Jason Schreier. Essentially, the situation here is Jason... I wouldn't at all say that he just reposted the whole situation, because he did speak to people and he got fresh new info and anecdotes to, I guess, more robustly help paint the picture that we've all been looking at. Just a few examples. So, in terms of things, there is, this, Ben Kilgore. Ben Kilgore, who was apparently Mike Morhaim's heir apparent. Now... one summer day in 2018, employees of Blizzard Entertainment opened their email to find a burst message from Mike Morhaim. It said the company parted ways with Ben Kilgore, the chief technology officer and heir apparent. Didn't give a reason, but employees gossiped. Kilgore presided over the most notorious group of sexist drinkers at the Irvine, California headquarters, where sexism and drinking were rampant, according to current and former employees. Yeah. I remember there was somebody who posted, whatever it was they posted, they've just quote tweeted, "Oh, that's a funny way to say Ben Kilgore." It seems like Kilgore was somewhat known, let's just say. Shortly afterwards, people got a supposed explanation during a large staff meeting. Derek Ingalls, who is now head of the technology department, was asked why his boss left, and he told a brief story that concluded with a strange piece of advice. Don't sleep with your assistant. But if you're going to sleep with your assistant, don't stop. So you can see how, to some people, this is just, all funny banter, right? Making light of the situation with Kilgore. But I think you can also very much see how this is the head of a technology department in a big company who is in a leadership role, whose job, is to lead and ensure that people at the company, perhaps including people who could be his assistant or assistants to people who are in that room, that's obviously going to make them feel unsafe and, uncomfortable, right? And then also, the HR rep was silent during all of this, and Ingalls left Blizzard to join Amazon. And he got some quotes from Christina. She was it Zarya? I forget exactly, but one of the Hearthstone community managers who was fired in that big wave, where she basically just said, it absolutely is a rockstar mentality, and it touched on almost every aspect of Blizzard culture. She worked at the company between 2013 and 19. These developers were untouchable. Not only could they tell you how to do your job, but they had so much power they could do whatever they want in line of sight with their other powerful friends. And I've essentially heard this as well. So I'm not from Christina, by the way, so I can independently back up what Christina is saying there. It is just the thing. At Blizzard, the developers are prized. They're very protected and shielded from everything else, and I think that's why you see Blizzard developers being involved in situations like this, and also that weird situation where you basically can't let a Blizzard developer have a Twitter account because they're going to get themselves in hot water, including things, as one did a few years ago, getting into flame wars in the DMs of your fans. Because that's a smart thing to do, and by the way, that particular developer, haha, I know who you are, well, yeah, that particular developer was partially responsible for a change in company policy regarding the usage of Twitter.com. Fucking funny. At least that one's funny because it's not tied to any, this horrible shit. Another thing here was basically between Morheim, Frank Pierce, and Jay Allen Brack, they basically all married employees. And I think by virtue of their job roles, all junior employees to themselves. Now, this is all, consensual relationships and stuff. Now, obviously, to some, that can set a bit of a precedent. So that's something worth thinking about. I think it's that tricky thing where, from what I understand, I don't know much of American culture. I will level with you, but I have spoken to a few Americans, and it is very common, the workplace relationship thing there. But I think it gets a little bit more troublesome when it's like getting to the very top echelons of a company, and the power difference is like, hey, I earn $120,000 a year, and you're worth $200 million plus. I think Morheim's worth a lot more. So that's the sort of thing where I think in these particular cases, these people did not, mean bad or anything like that, and it's just, hopefully good, consensual, happy marriages. But yeah, to a lower level employee might seem a bit weird. And then I guess the thing of precedent is also the thing where, we've seen some anecdotes from people of employees being a bit weird. Like that one who's like, some girl didn't want to date him, and he wrote a letter and started doing all this weird shit. You're like, whoa, what? Just weird behavior at Blizzard. Now, there's also, I think everybody would know, and that is that female employees learned to avoid the BlizzCon Hilton bar, because that is where people would hit their drunk colleagues, according to Christina and other staff. Men at all levels traded insults that regularly involved the word rape, according to the lawsuit and interviews. Some women found themselves so isolated they were even at odds with their female co-workers, according to Nikki Broderick, who worked between 2012 and 2019. Because there were so few women, the women really had to compete to stand out with their peers. It created a really toxic competitive environment, not just between the men and women at Blizzard, but the women themselves. This is this is something I've heard happens in workplaces. Heard stories from my mum, even of just people going at each other. That's totally a thing. There was one story, somebody who worked in the archivist department, Dana, someone who reportedly anyway was very, very abusive and mean to I forget her name, the woman in question. So, stuff like that going on, just the culture being bad. Then you've got the tech staff getting absolutely slammed during work hours, appearing with a hangover. And finally, in 2019, Blizzard introduced a 2-drink maximum policy for work functions. Not that that's going to stop. I mean, let's be real. Hip flask, away you go, right? It's not gonna. But the point is, the policy exists so that if somebody does obviously get so drunk that they end up doing bad things, well, then they have faulted the official policy and they have less of a defense. Many former Blizzard employees say they took pay cuts in return for the prestige of working at Blizzard. That's called the Blizzard tax. Yep, we've all heard that. Some Blizzard staff refer to Activision as the Eye of Sauron. Looming budget cuts mean resources can be scarce, and some Blizzard employees are reluctant to report internal problems that may draw attention, because I guess they're worried about the Eye of Sauron coming and killing them. However, a recent revision to the performance review system forces managers to give more frequent negative reviews, which results in less generous bonuses for the profit share of Blizz employees, according to 3 people familiar with the change. Several women said they fear this will give managers more opportunities to discriminate in conscious and unconscious ways that will further empower the rock stars of the company. And that's the sort of thing you can understand how, from a top-end perspective, they're maybe just thinking, right, the team is not growing. Managers, you've got to be real with the problems. You've got to give the negative feedback when it actually is needed. You can understand how that would be a reasonable seeming thing from the very top level, but then you have the issue of what happens when a policy like that reaches implementation. That's perhaps what's being brought up here. Now, there is one final update, and that is that Fran Townsend has stepped down from her role as the executive sponsor of the Women's Network. That happened on the 23rd of July. So, there we go. Blizzard news.
Yeah, it just keeps rolling, and it just isn't positive. There's just nothing good to ever say about them these days.
It's rough.
Really grim. I mean, the thing about Fran stepping down from the Women's Network is interesting because it's like, doesn't really matter, does it? It'll like be a hit to her resume, but it's not like she stepped down from her job or anything. It's just whoops. I'll just leave this specific role and be fine. But that's all. Like that's all really. You can see how small things impacted the culture over time. There in all those negative ways, because the idea of all of the high up Blizzard staff finding their partners in the company, that makes you think of the fact that they're living on the Blizzard campus. They're in games, they're in tech, which is, historically significantly more weighted to men.
Bit of a sausage fest.
And then you've got kind of like a isolated version of the problem that China has, where they just have more men than women.
Yeah.
And, in a society that's generally monogamous, suddenly you've got a supply problem, basically. You've got a supply problem of there aren't enough women for everyone in this area, and then men do some really crazy, weird shit and get highly desperate over this fact because they can't leave the campus because they live there, ostensibly, or, they work there 12 hours a day because they're working really hard and love working there. You've got these problems that compound.
Yeah, it's like, just run the experiment. Have a really large disparity. Have a work culture that involves crunching till you drop and living at the campus. And fucking guess what'll happen? Mm-hmm. Guess what'll happen? And it's therefore also no surprise that, it'll be the people with the bigger positions and stuff who are, in that environment going to be. So, yeah, it's no surprise to anyone who has lived on Earth. Like that particular bit.
Yeah.
And it's like if some of these issues are just going to pop up, almost because of the overall situation existing, and you don't want those things to pop up, then you just have to solve the problem with policy. Trying to build the culture and stuff.
Yeah, I mean,
it seems like they didn't do. Wow.
Yeah.
Anyway.
I mean, it comes back to the very small conversation that popped up on Twitter around like the toxicity in World of Warcraft, and why that doesn't exist in other places or exists in certain games. And it's fundamentally the same thing of this.
Fuck, Asmongold must work at Blizzard Entertainment then. Gotcha.
Yeah, but the idea is that this doesn't happen by accident. Behavior comes from the environment and from the systems. Obviously, there's a bit of nature in there as well, but that's vastly outweighed by the behavior design. So they've kind of, in the same way they've accidentally designed a game that leads to a relatively toxic player base. I mean, as many studios end up doing, just by nature of human competitiveness without the ways to hold that back. They've done the same in their workplace, where they've accidentally created all of the conditions for this behavior to grow in,
and
then haven't solved it.
That's I really like how you put it there, because it makes it very clear that while there are bad actors who absolutely knowingly did a lot of bad shit, the overall situation is probably one where nobody meant for it to be like this.
Yeah.
You can have a bunch of good people who mean well that produce very, very, very bad results, which seems to be what happened here. And that just highlights the importance of, systems, getting the culture right, like those things. Yeah. And I think that's just because it's very easy for people to say, oh, well, I'm not like that. I'm not like Ben Kilgore. I'm not like Alex Afrasabi, so this is never a problem I'll face. Where it's like, no, actually, those guys didn't create the problem. They just operated within the problem.
Mm-hmm.
That's, I guess, the thing to think about. It basically, it puts the onus quite a bit more on everyone.
Yeah.
Than just saying, oh, it's just a bad actor. Oh, very bad. We'll be angry at them. We'll kick them out, and then the problem will be solved, which is not how it is.
Yeah, the problem isn't the people. The problem is the situation and the systems and the overall culture.
And then the people.
Yeah.
the people as well, but yeah.
Yeah, which means the solution then is for everyone involved to pay attention to the systems, pay attention to the culture, and I guess, in a way, be the change you want to see.
Yeah.
Which just means everyone redesign your surroundings for a better future and a better culture. Which is that's largely how to solve these issues. It's not a fire half the staff, job done, we'll see you next week. Like,
yeah, I mean, like, these are an example. So for our game team, like, whenever Christmas comes around, happy to say we all get basically wankered.
Mm-hmm.
But it's also a small number of us. We've all known each other for years, and we've all been in those, like, drinking situations with each other for years. Now, if there was a whole bunch of new people and that team started to grow and grow and grow and grow, I'm very aware that we would need to change that, because it couldn't be that way anymore. And it's just that interesting thing of how do you start off small, but then whenever you're scaling, do so with intentionality and with thoughtfulness. It seems like that's just not what happened here.
yeah.
I don't want to say in fairness to, but perhaps an explanation for that is just people knowing about the importance of leadership and all of those things. That's a lot more of a developed field now in 2021. I got the year wrong, nice. Than it was back then. I guess the best that we can do is use examples of things going so bad to ensure they don't whenever we go and make things. So I think that's just that. So, bit of a rough spot for Blizzard. That's it for us. Hope you enjoyed the show. We will see you next time.